destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, October 30th, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Molly Redden, reporter covering national politics, and Andy Kroll, covering voting and elections and democracy, both from ProPublica. On the key MAGA leader who Donald Trump will be relying on to run/destroy our government. Also on the program today, 6 days until that election. Reuters national polls tied. CBS says in Pennsylvania, tied. Emerson in Michigan, tied. CNN, Arizona, Nevada, tied. North Carolina, wait for it, tied. And while 44 million people have already voted, Republicans outperforming 2020. But then again, in 2020, they were told not to early vote. Then again, Harris's campaign idea is we're going to have some Republicans vote for us. Then again, that may not work. Then again, there's a gender gap of 10 points. More women than men have early voted. And while the Supreme Court rejects Bobby Kennedy's bid to get off of the Wisconsin and Michigan ballots, that's going to be worth a few votes. Trump considering withholding of federal grants to police forces that don't take part in mass deportations. The economy grows at 2.8%. Job numbers stronger than expected as experts declare soft landing achieved. And Israel kills scores of civilians again in Gaza and Lebanon. Lastly, a split Fifth Circuit finds in favor of Elon Musk against the National Labor Relations Board. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us. Emma is out today. We are 6 days until the election, or 5 days, depending on whether you want to go by the 5-day measure or the 6-day measure. But it occurred to me that really what we should have been doing all along was, instead of looking at the shorter count, looking at the longer count, so that like somewhere around now we could say like it's even closer. Because I can't wait for this to be over, frankly.
Yeah, no.
I'm done with this already.
It's only a week left, but it still feels like you got half of it to go.
Well, the fact of the matter is, it's very likely we won't have a clear winner on the night of the election. It's also more than plausible that there's going to be controversy around the election until, January 20th, when someone gets inaugurated on that day. We have a couple of stories just off the top. The idea of mass deportation, that's for reals. I really do think that that is going to be the plan. This notion of the Fifth Circuit, I mean, it just shows you, how important something like that Colin Allred race is. Because if we have one Texas senator and we hold the Senate, the chances of sort of like breaking up the Fifth Circuit over the course of the next 4 years, not breaking it up totally, but putting a couple more Democrats on there and disempowering that, because every day we're talking about some ruling out of the Fifth Circuit. This one undercuts the National Labor Relations Bureau. This stuff is hugely important. Hugely important. And actionable. We can stop mass deportations. It's actionable. This is not, this is not a drill. And the Molly Redden and Andy Kroll are going to talk to us about a guy who was Donald Trump's former Office of Office of Management and Budget, which basically it's like the COO of the country. Although I got to be clear, I don't know really what a COO does, but Chief of Operations. The guy who's going to be responsible for really dismantling the administrative state. And this time around, Steve Bannon announced that's what they wanted to do the first time around with Donald Trump. They just didn't know how to do it. But this guy that we're going to be talking about, he's the one who came up with that whole Schedule F thing in the waning days of the Trump administration. This is all real. It's all real. It will impact the lives of millions upon millions of people for potentially decades. In the meantime, I heard this morning. Longtime listeners know that I try and listen to the bottom and the top of the hour AP headlines on normie stations, because I'm trying to get a sense of what is the news that someone who doesn't follow the news, follow politics gets. And sometimes it's disturbing, sometimes it's funny. This juxtaposition, I don't know how much of a difference it makes, but it struck me as pretty stark. This is just, I don't know, about 30 seconds of the AP headline news this morning, 6 days out from the election.
Trump and Kamala Harris aren't wasting any time.
Standing on the ellipse near the White House,
Donald Trump has spent a decade trying to keep the American people divided and afraid of each other.
Harris said that's who he is, but that's not what America is, and not what she will be once elected.
I pledge to be a president for all Americans.
Trump had earlier blasted Harris as unfit to be president.
A total train wreck who has destroyed everything in her path.
Sagar MAGA.
There
Washington.
you go. That's quite a juxtaposition. I mean, I don't know if it makes a difference, to be totally honest with you, at this point. It's going to come down to is how do these undecideds break? And do they break in a way, or do they just sort of like split up together? It's unclear. It's very difficult for me to put myself in the mindset of somebody who just like now is just starting to check in to the election. And, even as a kid, I was very, relatively engaged in politics. Here is, and, this is one of the things that Harris has had to do. And, she's not my favorite candidate in the world. She's obviously an upgrade from Joe Biden relative to where he was.
Just reminded us of that.
Who just reminded us of that. Completely oblivious, apparently, to like what her challenges are as opposed to like what his would have been. But here is CNN. They're down with a Georgia voter in a barber shop. And one of the things that Harris has had to do is contend with the fact, and we don't hear much about it at all. She would obviously be the first woman elected president. She would obviously also be the first black woman elected president. This campaign is not geared around, let's break the glass ceiling. She's not referencing any of that. And it's obviously still there in the minds of people who maybe have issue with black people, or maybe have issue with, like, can a woman really be president? Is that allowed? Here is CNN in this barbershop. This is from yesterday.
One topic of conversation has been the idea that some men don't want to vote for a woman president. Do you think that's a factor?
I hear that a lot.
Yeah. What do they say?
Women are too emotional to run the country.
What do you think of that?
What do I think of that? I'm married. You think I'm about to answer that?
But what do you say to them?
What do I say to them?
Yeah, when they say that.
I tell them the same thing I told you. I'm married, and my wife run my household. So, you know what? If they run the household like that, they could. I believe they can do it. I just thought about it. I believe a woman could run the presidency. I believe that.
On top.
I mean, this is the way that people are making their decision about voting. We just need to send somebody from CNN to every single voter and say, how about thinking about it for 5 minutes?
Yeah, I mentioned this the other day, but Matt Duss's podcast, he had on a guy named Chris Schell on episode 202, October 27th. Who Matters? Foreign Policy's Place in the Presidential Election with Chris Schell, but it's mainly geared toward the black turnout specifically. And things that come up are like Gaza, Ukraine, immigration, climate change, and China. And a lot of this is like, think about Biden and what's he saying? Look at NATO and look at all we're doing for like standing with our allies. And there's certain things where people say like, well, what about us? What's going on with our community? And I think that's more real than the misogyny thing is going to be covered, I think, a lot, and it probably will be. There's a lot of people that will elaborate that as a reason, but I think like the real problem is, why can't we turn people out for their own, like we're mentioning crypto and stuff like that. I don't know. I think that's the real problem here. If she loses those margins.
Well, I mean, we're going to have to see. If she loses, there's no doubt that the Gaza policy inhibited turnout. I mean, there's just going to be no doubt about it.
And just general foreign focus, like all the China stuff. And
I'm not sure that people are terribly invested in the China stuff, but that stuff, what happens is once you create a narrative, there's a lot of things that can sort of ride along on that narrative. And I mean, that's why Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden took off the way that it did, is because that's an underlying theme of the campaign. And so when there's anything that is even like, remotely related to it, it's almost like it becomes a magnet. It sticks to the hull of the ship, as it were. There's a lot of foreign policy stuff that would stick to the hull of the ship when you're financing and aiding and abetting, if you want to call it ethnic cleansing, like the editorial board of Haaretz called it, I think it was yesterday. If you want to call it genocide, like an esteemed historian from the University of Jerusalem called it again in an interview with Le Monde yesterday. However you want to call it, the slaughter of tens of thousands of people, that's going to create a narrative, and other things are going to stick to it in a way that they wouldn't if you weren't doing it, or if you had distanced yourself. And it's going to be both the first order votes that are lost because of it, and it's also going to be the enthusiasm from people who, I mean, you know, young people are the most idealistic. That's why it's young people who generally are the most active in these type of political campaigns. And they're the most idealistic, and they can be also the most disappointed by these things. And so you're dampening their enthusiasm. Who know? You know, we'll have a better sense of this in a week, but you know, certainly part of it is going to be, you know, some type of like vague misogyny.
And I also think there's a submerged women who won't vote for a woman vote out there that isn't as easy.
That's on the right.
Yeah, that's not as regularly elaborate, or in the sort of center. I don't know, like that's what worries me about this sort of centrist outreach, because I think, I don't know, I don't trust them as, I've seen somebody say like my mom was one of these people who like couldn't vote for Hillary and voted for Biden, and then all of a sudden is wavering again, and it's, I don't know, an aversion to seeing a woman in power sort of thing. But,
right. It's not because Biden was too much to the left.
Yeah.
I think there is definitely, but you know, there's frankly, with all due respect to people my age, there's less of us than there were during Clinton's run. That's how change happens. Honestly, there are ideas that end up literally just dying out. In a moment, we're going to be talking to Molly Redden and Andy Kroll. They're both from ProPublica, who have been reporting on the guy who I think is going to be sort of like the point person for orchestrating the destruction of our administrative state. And that is not hyperbole. We'll get there in a minute. First couple of words from our sponsors. Have you ever wondered how much of your personal data is on the internet for anybody to see? Well, it's a lot, and it's more than you think. Your name, your contact info, your social security number, your home address, even information about your family members, who you commingle with, all being compiled by data brokers and sold online. Over the last decade, the U.S. has witnessed a steady growth in politically motivated, threatening online behavior, peaking around election cycles. I would argue this has been for the last 2 decades, frankly, from my personal experience. And a key enabler of that is the abundance of sensitive personal information that's available. I don't need to tell you folks that there's a lot of like nuts out there who are able to find private personal details from data brokers on about 98% of U.S. citizens. However, for those of us who use Delete Me, it's less, frankly. You can't always control whether you're a target, but you can make it harder for motivated threat actors to escalate threats by taking a proactive approach to the security of your personal information. I've been using, this is one of those sponsors that, just a coincidence, but I've been using Delete Me for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, maybe more. What Delete Me does is it finds and removes any personal information you don't want online, and it makes sure it stays off. Delete Me is a subscription service that goes in when you sign up, removes your personal information from the largest people search databases on the web, and then continually updates it because those sites also update it. What it also does is it helps potential ID theft. It helps avoid doxing and phishing scams, because once they get some of your information, let's say they get your email off of some like data leak, they can go back in, go to one of these data broker sites, and then sort of reverse engineer all sorts of stuff about you. Sign up and provide Delete Me with exactly what information you want deleted, and their experts take it from there. Delete Me sends you regular personalized privacy reports showing what info they found, where they found it, and what they removed. Delete Me, like I say, is not just a one-time service. Delete Me is always working for you, constantly monitoring and removing the personal information you don't want on the internet. To put it simply, Delete Me does all the hard work of wiping you and your family's personal information from data broker websites. Take control of your data. Keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me now at a special discount for our listeners. Today, get 20% off your Delete Me plan by texting majority to 64,000. So text majority on your phones to the number 640000. 64,000. That's majority to 64,000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details. Also, I am a front wallet carrier. I have always been. I don't like it in my back. It's bad for your back. And also, you ride the train, somebody can pickpocket you. My son always tries to do this with me when I walk around the house with my phone in my back pocket. Well, I don't want a bulky wallet. I have always in search of one that is slimmer. So here it is. Small and compact. Ridge wallets have completely transformed how I carry my essentials, as it were, in this minimalist form. I don't know how many credit cards I have in there right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 credit cards plus my cash right out in front. That's it right there. Super handy like this. Pops out. It has RFID blocking technology for added security against digital theft, because people can bump up against you with some type of thing that reads your stuff. Comes in over 50 colors and styles. There's something for everybody. They've received 100,000 5-star reviews. It comes with a 99-day risk-free trial and a lifetime guarantee. I thought I would have a problem with like a rigid wallet, and no, it's sleek, it's slim. I carry a bunch of, I don't know why I carry so many credit cards. They're all debit cards, but one is like our joint account for the kids' expenses. I mean, I don't need to justify this anyway. If you're tired of bulky wallets, I highly recommend this Ridge wallet. Definitely changed the way that I have carried my essentials. Go to ridge.com/majority. Use the code majority, one word, for 10% off. Thanks, Ridge, for sponsoring this episode and making the front of my pants look sleek, as it were. We will put a link to both of these in the podcast and YouTube description and at majority.fm. Quick break. When we come back, Molly Redden, Andy Kroll, both reporters from ProPublica, on the key MAGA leader who has planned and hopes to execute that plan for a new Donald Trump administration. We'll be right back. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma Vigeland out today. Want to welcome back to the program Andy Kroll, reporter covering voting, elections, and democracy at ProPublica. And welcome Molly Redden, also from ProPublica, covering national politics. Welcome to you both. Molly, let's start with you. You guys have written up this guy, Russell Vogt, and we'll play the video. In fact, let's play this. Let's start before we get into this. This guy was a former Trump administration director of the Office of Management and Budget. This is like the I don't know. It's like the little man, in the brain who's pulling all the levers in the cartoon for the way that our government functions. Here he is, caught by some undercover reporters. This is the guy, people will remember this because he was the one who was talking about how he's not worried about Donald Trump distancing himself from Project 2025.
Support of what we do, and know that we have all manner of things that we do that's, even unrelated to Project 2025. So I see what he's doing is just very, very conscious, distancing himself from a brand.
And you're not going to publish those?
No.
They go straight to.
Yeah.
That's Russell Vogt. We've got another video that you guys have posted, but Molly, let's just start with you. Just for a moment, contextualize for us. This is the guy who is the head of the Office of Management and Budget. Give us a little bit more about his resume and how close he is to Donald Trump, or at least to the apparatus that wants to go ahead with the plans, as Steve Bannon said almost 8 years ago now, to destroy the administrative state.
So when Vogt was involved with the Office of Management and Budget in the last Trump administration, what he really sought to do was take this office, which basically directs where money goes in the federal government, and try to make it much more an agent of Trump's personal agenda and sort of ignore any congressional instruction or just normal operations of government, how money is supposed to move, and really turn the federal budget into an engine for MAGA policy. They kind of figured out how to do it by the end of the Trump administration. And I think why he and his cohort are really eager for a second Trump administration is they think they can move much more quickly, deliberately, efficiently, politically, ideologically in a second Trump administration. He runs a think tank called the Center for Renewing America, and they are part of this sort of broader coalition led by the Heritage Foundation that is organizing Project 2025, which I assume your listeners are pretty familiar with.
Well, Andy, let's I want to get to Project 2025 so that you can lay it out so that people can understand it, maybe just in bullet points. But this dynamic of the first time that Trump went in there, he brought in a lot of people. I remember the story of Jared Kushner walking through, being given a tour, when they first won, and he's looking around and going like, are there any of these people who leave? As he's looking at and the guy giving him a tour says, they all leave. And they had no idea what they were walking into. And they had to rely on longtime sort of like normies on some level to integrate. By the end of the Trump years, Trump was starting to figure out like, oh, I need these guys who are complete loyalists to me. And the plans were starting to be generated. Talk about, before we get to Project 2025, talk about the whole Schedule F thing that we heard a lot about in the waning days of the Trump administration. It's like they figured something out during that time and just didn't have the time to implement it.
Yeah. And Sam, you make a good point too about the Trump administration officials the first time around. Real briefly, on a spectrum of like Rex Tillerson to Steve Bannon of these Trump 1.0 officials, Russ Vogt is very, 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 very close to Steve Bannon. And these are the kind of people who, if Trump wins this year's election, will fill out the second Trump administration. The Tillersons, the John Kellys, all of those people, they're long gone. They've endorsed Kamala Harris. They've stayed on the sidelines, whatever. Russ Vogt is with the other camp that are itching to get back in for the reasons that Molly just explained. Schedule F was something that Russ Vogt was instrumental in. It kind of got lost at the end of the first Trump administration in 2020 around the election and the Stop the Steal. But Trump signs an executive order that would reclassify tens of thousands of federal employees, take away their job protections, make them easier to fire. Now, these are not political appointees. We're talking about nonpartisan career government workers, scientists, subject matter experts, lawyers, people who do the work of the government, the taxpayer work without partisan agendas or affiliations, make it easier to fire them and to potentially replace them with political loyalists. And now Russ Vought is a huge proponent of reviving Schedule F if Trump wins, firing as many of those people as possible. And we get into this in our story, we can talk about this, but really traumatizing government workers is what Russ Vought calls for explicitly, and then replacing them with political loyalists. And that, of course, would be a massive, massive sea change in government, a return to the spoils system, raise all kinds of questions and problems about how the U.S. government actually serves the American citizens.
You mentioned that plan to traumatize bureaucrats. We have a video that I found from a thread that you did, Andy. And we should say, there are examples of how they just literally make life harder for, and these things are filled out, like you say, non-political appointees. They're just people who, I'm interested in science, environmental science, I'll go work for the EPA. I'm interested in land management. I think it was the Bureau of Land Management that they basically blew apart and had everybody move out of Washington, D.C. They closed the offices in D.C. and said, you got to move out into other areas. You've got people who've been working in D.C. going over this stuff for years. My understanding is that the vast majority of the senior members of that agency quit, took early retirement, did a different job, and there's no sort of like institutional memory, and that's the way that you ruin an institution. Let's play this clip of Russell Vought talking about traumatizing bureaucrats.
We want the bureaucrats to be traumatically affected. We want, when they wake up in the morning, we want them to not want to go to work because they are increasingly viewed as the villains. We want their funding to be shut down.
Now pause it for a second. I just want to say, you hear somebody laugh because somebody there thinks like, oh, this is funny. He doesn't crack a smile. He doesn't crack a smile. This guy, he's not joking. He understands that personnel is policy. And if he can dismantle the sort of like the apparatus by attacking the people who make up the apparatus, that's his job. Go ahead.
Them to not want to go to work because they are increasingly viewed as the villains. We want their funding to be shut down so that the EPA can't do all of the rules against our energy industry because they have no bandwidth financially to do so. We want to put them in trauma.
I mean, Molly, give us a sense, and both of you can chime in on this, but, he said in the earlier video, Project 2025 is just one thing that we're doing. And the other is obviously these other sort of like commensurate plans, the Schedule F, the others. But walk us through like some of the highlights, lowlights of Project 2025. I mean, it's a huge document. It's very comprehensive. But just walk us through this because it's both an agenda and a plan to execute sort of rolled up in one.
Yeah, it's both a policy agenda, a series of policy goals, and then how to actually execute it. Part of what Andy talked about earlier, getting rid of anybody who would stand in the way, like they did last time, of doing things that the federal government, typically doesn't do or just are extremely unpopular. And I think a really key part that a lot of people will be familiar with is Project 2025 lays out a pretty detailed agenda for restricting abortion rights, restricting people's access to abortion medication, making it impossible for women to travel for abortions. And I think, part of why when we should say the Trump campaign has said that he doesn't know anything about Project 2025, there's really extensive reporting that people involved with writing it are also very involved with this campaign. There's reporting on Trump spending a lot of time with the key architects of Project 2025. But abortion restrictions are one really unpopular element. Really scrubbing any attempts to address climate change, even any references to climate change, within government material. That's part of what he's talking about here is not just getting rid of government attempts to address climate change, but making the very people whose job it is to address climate change just not want to show up for work in the morning. And I think that's a good example of sort of this multi-pronged effort. It's both policy and then how to make it possible to execute this really hard right agenda. Andy, what am I missing? There's so much in there.
No, I mean, I think that's all really good. I mean, the other part, and this is something we reported at ProPublica, is there's this whole personnel piece of identifying, recruiting, vetting, and then placing people in a future Trump administration. That is a key part of Project 2025. Russ Vought has been a key architect of those efforts. They call it their transition plan. And you just look at the things that we've reported about that personnel piece of this. One video we reported earlier this year said that future Trump staffers should, quote, eradicate every reference to climate change. So that gives you a sense of what they want to do or not do on climate change. They talk about removing anything in federal government that has to do with combating gender inequality, eradicating the government of all of those policies. And I think, honestly, there's some content in those videos where the people who are going to lead a next Trump administration say, like, don't come work for us if you're not ready to do dramatic things. If you're not ready to be socially ostracized, if you're not ready to be, lose contact with family members, with friends, whatever, like, don't bother coming to work for us. And all of this rolls together to just give you a picture of there are not moderate style conservatives and Republicans that are lining up to work for Trump 2.0 if he wins. We're talking about people like Russ Vought. We're talking about people like potentially Steve Bannon again coming back and having some kind of role. We're talking about a much, much more hard right agenda and set of people going on the inside that would try to put that agenda into motion.
You're saying this aspect of Vought saying, don't come work for us unless you are prepared to be ostracized. Like, you're going to be hated. If you're one of those people and who was, like a Rex Tillerson, who's going to tap on the brakes because you're afraid of what's going to happen at the country club, don't come here because we want only radicalists. It is just yesterday, Steve Bannon, Bradley, on this video, Steve Bannon came out and said something very similar, although a little bit more dramatic, where Steve Bannon is basically saying, if you're part of this movement, you got to be prepared to give it all. Just watch this.
And our coalition is now going to include a wide swath of African-American men and Hispanic men. This is the game changer. I'll give you a lot of details about that, of things I learned in prison. Let me say something. If you're not prepared to be sent to a federal prison as a political prisoner, then you're not worthy to be in this movement and to step forward and try to save your country. You have to understand, they want to put you in prison, and they will put you in prison. If you can't accept that, then you don't know what they represent.
All
they
right,
talk
well,
about
there it is.
President Trump.
We're talking about, so they're gearing up. If you're going to be part of this, be prepared to be ostracized. One more thing I wanted to touch on with Vought is that this guy wasn't just formally in the Office of Management and Budget. He was the director of the Republican National Committee's official platform committee. This is ahead of the nominating convention. I mean, is there any other, what other position could there be short of being the candidate that would have more say about the agenda going forward? And, we know from Donald Trump, at least in his various criminal and civil trials, he's not a hands-on guy. He likes to farm it out, apparently, to his now, I think, imprisoned CFO. But he was the head of the platform committee, as well as obviously one of the architects of Project 2025. What else should we know? I mean, this is important stuff, I think, to sort of educate people on how they're going to vote. I suspect, though, a lot of that's baked into the cake. people who are going to vote on this type of information probably have already decided but this is also really important to understand that in the event that Trump wins, people have to move quickly. Like what, Molly, like I'm sure you and Andy have talked about, like what's going on to sort of push back against this agenda if they're in a position to actually implement it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a matter of how quickly can they move. Trump is a little bit mercurial. It's a lot's going to come down to do these people remain in his favor? But if they do, I think their plan is to move very, very quickly. These are the plans people. Trump goes on the campaign trail and talks about wanting to use the military to put down protests, and that he's okay with that. This is the group of people who are assembling the lawyers who are going to work for the federal government, rationalizing why that's not against the law, why that's okay. So I think, what you're seeing here is the guts of a plan to move very, very quickly to sort of shock people with how quickly the federal government makes a hard right turn.
Andy, talk about that for a moment too. I think it was your reporting that said that he is creating a shadow OLC. Tell people what the OLC is and what the implications of a shadow OLC means.
Yeah, the OLC is this sort of in-house legal shop for the executive branch. And I think, for your audience out there, they may remember one of the more notorious chapters in the OLC's history. This was the office that sort of produced the legal memos justifying what the Bush administration, the second Bush administration, called enhanced interrogation techniques, aka torture. That was the office that infamously turned out these legal justifications to basically allow the government, the military intelligence agencies to engage in torture during the Iraq War. But what Russ Vought is talking about when he says a shadow OLC, and he also talks about a shadow OMB, Office of Management and Budget, which we talked about earlier, is having not only the executive orders in place, not only the regulations in place meaning drafted, which Vought says that he and his people have done, but also having these draft legal justifications for something like using the Insurrection Act to deploy the military to a major American city in response to massive protests along the lines of what we saw in 2020. So that is another step further, is he's got these legal justifications, according to Vought, already teed up in his shadow OLC. And look, if you're a voter out there who's still making up their mind, I hope you'll watch this because it's and read our story, because it's a clear sort of vision into what Trump 2.0 would be, but also for lawyers who care about these things, for government workers who care about these things. You're seeing the plan laid out, and you're seeing what a key Trump ally and likely, Trump senior official wants to do, because he's saying it very clearly. And so hopefully people can take this information and it arms them and it informs them in some way going forward.
I just want to reiterate, during the first Trump administration, there was a 5-4 conservative Supreme Court. It wasn't until literally weeks before the election that we had a 6-3 court. That court shut down a lot of stuff that the Trump administration tried to do, in part, in a large part, just because the Trump administration didn't know how to do it. And so what it seems to me that Vought is talking about is taking the enormous amount of right-wing funding there is and literally creating these shadow agencies, because they can't necessarily get them in government in time, producing, it's almost like one of those old corporate EPK packets where, they do the industrial and they hand it to the news and the news just runs it like, Rightline has got a new product that is really, stirring things up locally, that type of thing. It feels like that. Like they're doing the work of the OLC, giving it to the OLC and just saying, put your imprimatur on this. And all they need is one person there to basically say, yeah, this is what it is. I mean, this is really terrifying stuff.
Yeah, it is. And, that's our specialty at ProPublica, clearly. But, we would rather people know this than not know this. And, forewarned is forearmed, or whatever the saying is. And again, I think whatever whatever job you're in, cause you care about, wherever you live, a second Trump administration, if it comes to that, is not going to be the chaos disaster that the first one was, where they were throwing out sloppy orders and courts were overturning them, and it was chaos from one day to the next, 1 hour to the next. Repeatedly in our reporting this year, this story about Russ Vogt, our Project 2025 stuff earlier this year, the same theme gets repeated, which is his allies have learned from the first term. They have learned from their mistakes, seen where their policies got gummed up, overturned, delayed, whatever, and are planning now with those lessons in mind. And so, yes, as Molly said, things will move faster, a lot faster than they did before. And whatever side of this you're on, you should know that if Trump wins, things are going to, likely move quite a bit faster than they did before.
Molly Redden, Andy Kroll, both reporters at ProPublica. We will put a link to your piece at majority.fm. We'll also link to both of your Twitter accounts because I know you guys are putting up threads talking about this stuff. Very important stuff to know, regardless of whether it's a question of voting or your friends or family voting or just, frankly, on day one, it's a totally different ballgame than the first Trump administration. I think this really makes it clear. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break and then head into the fun half. I mean, honestly, it's very easy to look at Donald Trump as some type of like aging, lunatic. But one of the things that I think you can see from the Biden administration, particularly, there have been presidents who are known to be hyper engaged, right? Like a Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter on some level were known to be like sort of like extremely hands-on. And then there are ones that are a little bit more sort of distant, George W. Bush, frankly. And I think it's pretty clear that Biden also basically said to, farmed out to Warren and to Sanders, who do I hire for antitrust stuff? Who do I hire for labor stuff? And we got good results because of that. And I think he also sort of like farmed out foreign policy on some level to some of the worst players in our government. Brett McGurk, Hochstein. And we got bad stuff from that. There is no way that Donald Trump is going to sit there and micromanage this stuff. Plan beats no plan. You can take that from Tim Geithner. You can take it from Warren Buffett. You can take whoever you want. Like a plan beats no plan. And these are the people with a plan. There is no other plan for a Trump administration. They're working out mass deportation. They're working out the destruction of the administrative state. They are fully 100% committed to it. They have a running start, not just the past 6 months or 9 months, but everything they learned from the first Trump term. It is not going to be, a second Trump term is not going to be the same as the first. It really isn't. It's going to be a lot more dire. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to be targeted. And that's where it starts. So, like I say, a lot of people, this election is going to end up being decided by people who really don't have a deep passion for these questions. And but for people who do, it's really a matter of like getting ready for what happens after the election in the event that Trump wins. Just a reminder, your support is what keeps this show going. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free show, free commercials, but you get the so-called fun half, which is sometimes fun. Also, we're going to send out a text on this if you're on the app at majorityapp.com. You don't have to be a member to get the app. The app is totally free. To remind you that I'm going to be live on the Tim Pool Show Friday. You will not see me before then. It's possible I may YouTube stream my getting up at 4 a.m. to do this dumb trip. It was an impulse buy on my part.
If I was here that Friday, I would have said, do you want to maybe stretch out the timeline on it a little bit?
I probably should have done it after the election. But then I was like, I didn't realize November 1st was like, oh, November 1st. I got nothing to do on November 1st. And then I didn't realize it was the night after Halloween.
Between Halloween and
and I'm not going to miss Halloween to do this dumb thing. So I will be live there. And I don't know, maybe I can convince a couple of Tim Pool's audience to vote against Donald Trump. What would they need to hear? Outlying skateboarding? I don't know. I mean, I think to a large extent they don't have a problem with any of this.
Yeah, I know. He needed to not be daddy anymore. How do you make that happen?
Don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, hot chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. ESVN.
On ESPN yesterday, we broke down the Week 8 slate of NFL action, and tomorrow, Emma and I will be back at 4 p.m. Eastern to give our picks of the week ahead of the Week 9 NFL action, and we'll also discuss some of the injury and trade news that has come out since Monday, as well as the Yankees winning Game 4 of the World Series last night.
Whatever.
YouTube.com.
Basketball is really the only sport that counts now.
Yeah,
Matt.
I mean, I was happier in the first quarter of the Timberwolves game last night. Last night, Left Reckoning, Austin Allman came on to talk about Osborne versus Fisher in Nebraska. And we also Griscom talked with Paul North and Paul Ryder, who put the new translation of Marx's Capital Volume 1 together. So if you're planning on reading that new translation of Marx, you can get a little primer on why they retranslated it. So check that out, patreon.com/Left Reckoning, where we talked about Jordan Peterson and the biology of dragons with Richard Dawkins, which was actually very fun. A little philosophical conversation, which all comes down to basically Jordan Peterson can't level with people that he doesn't believe in God like they actually do. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
Quick break. Fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Dinner.
Yeah, or a couple of them, just put them in rotation.
DJ Dinner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs that look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males.
Psych. Fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Wait, am I called into the thing? I heard it too, but I don't see it. It's weird. Fart Wayne, what's New York trick-or-treating like? How much candy will Saul bring home? We live in a popular trick-or-treat. Oh, my God. Trick-or-treat neighborhood, and we get 900 to 1,100 trick-or-treaties, depending on weather. In Brooklyn, it can get crazy. I mean, it's much better than Worcester was.
Do people just go through apartment buildings or how?
Both?
Yeah,
both. And the thing is, in the apartment buildings, a lot of time people will just like put a bowl out, and so like the kids will come by and they just like scope it out like this, and then they just take the whole bowl. Kowalski from Nebraska with a long one. This is a bit lengthy, but there's a point. Last Wednesday, I was on a telephone town hall call with hundreds of Nebraskans to talk with Senator Pete Ricketts and Congressman Foote from Nebraska's